Good evening. Welcome to a special Queer American Independence edition of Queer News Tonight. This is the world's first and only LGBTQ+ daily evening television news, broadcasting live and available on demand. Available on all smart televisions including Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, YouTube, and Facebook. It's time to queer up the news. It's Tuesday, July 4th, 2023. We are live and literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your important stories we are going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight.
This is the world's first live daily LGBTQ evening news show, literally out of the closet and into the headlines on Queer News Tonight with Al Ferguson.
I'm your anchor at Queer News Tonight, Julio Capo Jr., and not Al Ferguson, to be very clear. This evening, we bring you the news of and perspective representing the LGBTQ+ community from South Florida, America, and across our planet.
This is the world's first and only unedited live LGBTQ evening news show. Whatever happens, unique and LGBTQ+ news, you will see it and hear it.
Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network, is a nonprofit 501c3 media company in the same model of PBS and NPR, but designed for the LGBTQ+ community. Our mission is to support the 10 pillars of our LGBTQ+ community. We want to inform and educate the key issues of our Black community, Latino, lesbian, trans, students, youth, seniors, HIV/AIDS healthcare, business, social justice, and faith. Help us support our community.
We are part of one of the largest LGBTQ+ media companies in America, Hotspots Magazine and Happening Out Television Network.
Our magazine is celebrating 38 years of the LGBTQ+ experience, and our television news, talk, and entertainment shows support our mission to educate the LGBTQ+ and broader community.
All right, all. Let's welcome anchor Jess Rachel. Jess has lived in New York City, Los Angeles, Nashville, and now we got her here in Miami.
Yay.
She's the founder of Soaring Vibrations. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Tell us a little about Soaring Vibrations.
Soaring Vibrations is a wellness company that creates an intimate community of like-minded people to get together, move our bodies, dance, sweat, heal. It's really about connecting with your soul. There's such few, companies out there that really create communities that are for the wellness, especially pride related for lesbians in particular. Yeah. So much stuff out there for the gay boys, but not that much for the gay girls. Yeah. So I'm trying to, collectively get people like that together.
Awesome.
And you can find us at Soaring Vibrations on Instagram.
Awesome. Please do that all. Yeah.
Yes. Let's welcome anchor Gregg Shapiro, an inductee into the Chicago LGBT Hall of Fame. Gregg is the author of 9 books. His entertainment coverage, including celebrity news, runs in a variety of regional print and online publications. Welcome, Gregg.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction.
Yes.
And speaking of celebrity interviews, the new issue of the Washington Blade at WashingtonBlade.com has my interview with Belinda Carlisle of the Go-Go's.
Tell us. That sounds fun. Was it a good interview?
I love her. Yeah, she's really good. She's the mom of a gay son. So
I didn't know that.
Yes, and so she's a longtime supporter of our community.
Does she talk about that?
She does.
I'm asking you questions. I'm like, tell us about everything.
Read the interview.
All right, John, good call.
Let's welcome anchor Elijah Manley. Elijah is a community organizer, activist, and formerly the youngest ever candidate for the Florida House of Representatives. He is the owner of Benchmark Strategies, a South Florida consulting firm. Welcome, Elijah.
Great to be here. Happy 4th, and chill out on the firecrackers tonight.
Yeah, our dogs will thank you.
Yes.
Let's welcome anchor Bob Hentschel, an accountant by profession. Bob is on the planning committee for My Hollywood Pride. He describes himself as a nice widow man with a house in Dayton Beach, a Disney Vacation Club membership, and a self-supporting cash flow. Hi, Bob. And
Hello.
I love a part of that cash flow. Send some of it my way.
Well, happy July 4th from me and Patriot Gnome, from my friend artist Mara Casanovas, and a special shout out to the Lansdale Catholic class of 1983, of which I am a part, celebrating the 40th anniversary of our graduation.
Oh,
I don't know whether I want to laugh, cry, or drink myself to death. Anyway, we are the reporters for Queer News Tonight, and this evening we begin with the queer headlines. The LGBTQ plus community in South Florida and across America is diverse. Our community across the world is vast, and today we present a special Independence Day edition of Queer News Tonight.
Let's begin by queering up the USA view. In queer American history, Abraham Lincoln writes poem, "But Billy has married a boy." In 1829, Abraham Lincoln wrote a poem about gay marriage. Yeah, you heard correctly. A decade ago, the Washington Blade published a piece in which Mark Siegel told why he thought the dismissal by most historians that Lincoln might have been gay was unconvincing to him. Siegel is the founder and publisher of Philadelphia Gay News, the country's oldest LGBTQ+ news weekly. He mentioned a poem from 1829 written about a boy marrying a boy. The creator of this poem was a 20-year-old man in rural Indiana, and his name was Abraham Lincoln. This poem is thought to be the first reference to gay marriage in U.S. history. Most historians agree that Lincoln wrote the poem as a joke or a rebuttal to the lack of an invitation to a friend's wedding. But how a backwoodsman conceived a boy marries a boy poem in 1829 remains a big question. The poem was included in the first major biography of Lincoln, written by his law partner, William Herndon. Revisionists omitted it in subsequent editions. It didn't reappear in Herndon's edition until the 1940s. The poem starts like this, quote, "I will tell you a joke about Jewel and Mary. It is neither a joke nor a story. For Reuben and Charles have married 2 girls, but Billy has married a boy," end quote. I feel like, all right, so I have thoughts on this, and I'm a historian. That's what I do, and like, this isn't gay marriage. This is not.
I agree. I think it's a stretch.
It's a little bit of a stretch. But I do think there's some that is like, and to be fair, something similar to same-sex unions has existed, and like the Catholic Church used to condone them, like actually used to even back in the medieval ages. Like, so this is not, but part of the thing about sexuality and gender is so much of it is constructed, right? So that it's like they change over time. Ideas of marriage have changed over time. Gay people like didn't see themselves as gay people until very recently. Like that is like you didn't like revolve your life around, you know, same-sex attractions, right?
Right. Giving it a name, giving it a culture. And although I have to say that as both a poet and a gay man, I am honored to think that in some small way, I might have something in common with one of the country's most beloved presidents.
Oh, now you made me feel bad.
Sounds woke.
I think
Sounds woke.
really incredible that this, you know, dates back to 1829.
Yeah.
Almost 200 years ago.
That you know, it stands out to me the most, and the fact that they were talking about this back then, which goes to show that, you know, this isn't something that's brought on to people or persuaded or something like that.
That's a good point.
I mean, I have some thoughts on the whole, like, Abraham Lincoln could have been gay. Like, I don't really like that line of stuff because you'll never know, and you can't really, like, go back and, like, assign somebody a sexuality based on things.
But meanwhile, allegedly there were gay presidents. I don't know which one it was.
Allegedly.
But, well, there was one president that was routinely referred to as Aunt Fancy.
And the Bachelor. And like the thing about, like, people have been obsessed about Abraham Lincoln's sexuality for decades. And like, if you've even seen that awful movie, what was that awful movie with Bros?
It was awful.
It was, I mean, and I'm sorry, this is not opinion, it's just fact.
I'm done with movies like that. I'm sorry.
There was even like a small plot or like a small subplot or something about Abraham Lincoln being gay, and they're like, oh, and you want to put him back in in the closet. And I was like, this is somehow made the movie worse. Like, I mean, I don't like it somehow it managed.
So let me take a different tack. If it's true, and I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but I have a problem with the fact that it got erased, because that's oftentimes the first step to erasing us, is erasing, you know, we don't know if he was gay, he might have been bi, he could have just been an ally. Who knows? We're never going to know.
Had a friend.
I mean, unless you dig him up and ask him, you know. Then,
I don't know that I would dig up Zombie Lincoln.
And I just, my issue is I don't like when people like he said he was heterosexual. I'm sure Abraham Lincoln made that known. Like the whole like assuming or like saying somebody might have been, I think, does more harm to our community than anything.
I'm married to a man, lots of children.
He could have.
Of course, that hasn't stopped. You know,
might have been.
Doesn't mean anything. Yeah.
Well, that's also as historians, when we are trying to show that someone was gay over time, the burden of proof is so high. Like you're like, how do you know the X, Y, or Z? When that's not true for straight people, right? Like you don't have to be like prove that this person's straight. You're just like, it's always just kind of assumed. That's always like the default sexuality. But also like even if he had same-sex attractions, he wouldn't have understood himself in that same way, which is not, it's important as in history for us to understand that things change over time, right? Like that, including the way we see ourselves, and that communities grew and built out of our desires and our, ability to, be a community.
But I will say it's important to remember that at the same time that he was alive, Walt Whitman was alive.
Yeah. And certainly was.
And there was no question.
You're right, well said.
In 200 years, don't go back and be like, was Elijah Manley actually straight? He was actually straight.
So set the record straight, Elijah.
That's right.
I was not straight. I was a homosexual man my entire life.
You heard it first here.
That's right.
It's coming out.
You have the receipts, I think.
We have the receipts.
Next, let's queer up LGBTQ plus civil rights. In queer American history, July 4th, 1965, the modern gay rights movement started at Independence Hall in Philadelphia. Philadelphia has a long history of fighting for LGBTQ civil rights. In fact, Philadelphia protests seeking equality for LGBTQ plus people predate the famed Stonewall riots. From 1965 to 1969, demonstrators picketed at Independence Hall on July 4th. The annual reminder protests pointed out that LGBTQ plus Americans did not have basic civil rights protections. The protests were among the earliest for LGBTQ plus rights in the United States. These were protests organized by LGBTQ plus activists Frank Kameny, Barbara Giddings, and others. Many see Barbara Giddings as the mother of the LGBTQ plus civil rights movement. The demonstrations were strategically held on Independence Day, July 4th, to draw attention to the lack of civil rights and equality for LGBTQ plus individuals. The activists picketed outside Independence Hall and the Liberty Bell, calling for an end to discrimination and advocating for the recognition of LGBTQ plus rights. The annual reminders were influential in raising awareness about LGBTQ plus issues and challenging societal norms surrounding homosexuality. Although the modern gay rights movement gained significant momentum after the Stonewall Uprising in 1969, the annual reminders played a crucial role in laying the groundwork for future activism and were part of the broader efforts to achieve equality for the LGBTQ plus community. Two of my very, very favorite historic sites that I visit every time I'm in Philly, the city of both brotherly and sisterly love. There's the historical markers. There's the one in front of Independence Hall that actually cites the annual reminders marches. It's amazing. And then a few blocks away, at the corner of 21st and Locust, is a sign for Barbara Giddings. So it just makes me feel like going on there in the gay neighborhood.
That's great.
Yeah.
I did not know this before reading the news story.
Wow.
And interesting, it took place 11 days before I was born. Yes, I'm aging myself. But I mean, it points to a much larger, Stonewall is important, and it is, but there's just so much gay history prior to Stonewall.
Well said.
You know, we're sitting at the Sunshine Cathedral, which I don't know if it still is or it's not, but you know, it was part of the Metropolitan Community Churches, which were started in 1968 by the Reverend Troy Perry, who got defrocked for being gay.
Yeah.
Let's go back 20 years, 25 years prior to that. You know, if you've seen the pink triangle that ACT UP used back in the day, that comes from the Nazi death camp. That's how they marked the gays in the Nazi death camps.
That's right.
And I remember sharing that fact at Hollywood Pride, and people didn't know that. And it's like,
Yeah, it's a good point.
History is important.
there's also a little matter of the Walt Whitman Bridge in Philadelphia.
I was thinking about that, going back to the wall.
Yeah.
I mean, the need for this is so critical because, I mean, and in a moment where they're trying to not just like, they're trying to erase our history. They're trying to erase us, right? And like more than ever, these stories need to be told, need to be commemorated. Also, Mark Stein wrote this fabulous book. He's a historian. He's a dear friend who wrote The City of Sisterly and Brotherly Loves that tells the significance of Philadelphia at being at the center of so many of these early debates, pre-Stonewall and certainly after Stonewall. But I cut you off, I think, and I didn't mean to.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that all of these historical stories are important for us to remember and talk about. Despite which one happened first or last, I think it's really important to just remember and, you know, bring all of them to the surface and
I also didn't
reflect.
know. Like, I also didn't know until I read about that at all.
What year was the Harvey Milk in San Francisco? When did that all happen?
There was 78. 78.
Right after Anita Bryant.
Yeah.
And these are, I mean, like, these are the stories we know, even if we don't know them well. How many do we not even know yet?
Well, people don't talk about the
like, go to the archives.
It would have been great to learn this in school.
One thing I forgot to mention about the pink triangle, and this was something I didn't even know, but when they liberated the camps at the end of world, the gays were not liberated. There was a paragraph. There was something in the German Penal Code, paragraph 175. There's actually a documentary on it, and you know that they were not liberated with everybody else. And that I may die mad about that one.
I honestly didn't know much about the gay community during the Holocaust at all, and I have a fascination with the Holocaust. So I've never heard of a triangle. I'm definitely going to do my research about that. I'm very intrigued.
It's
The Men with the Pink Triangles, the Hegel book.
And there's a memoir even. I mean,
I know this is morbid, but I follow, I believe it's called the Auschwitz Memorial Museum on Twitter, and they're daily posting things, and round about June they start posting, maybe not necessarily June, but
For
I
5
mean,
months. It makes sense though.
it's out there.
It would be great if they made a movie about gays during the Holocaust.
They actually, the movie is called Paragraph 175.
Oh,
I don't know if it's I don't know if it was a documentary or a movie, but it's out there.
Well, and there's Bent about the gay couple.
That's right.
That is
I've never seen it. But
Is that about the
devastating.
Holocaust?
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's like one that focuses on like the Soviet like their attack.
That's right.
I guess I'll rephrase. I wish they would make an Oscar-worthy movie where people
Big
talked
production.
about it and it was really
Got the attention.
Yeah,
Something
you know, like
modern.
The Pianist, or you know, a movie that is
Schindler's
spoken
List,
about and remembered, and hopefully one day.
Here's the thing: we finally saw a genre movie win Best Picture. I think it's only a matter of time before a documentary wins Best Picture.
Yeah.
I mean, and then we should, like, I was thinking so much, Bob, of what you said, because it's so, in terms of the activists know the history often, and like often they do their best work when they know history. Like ACT UP used specifically the pink triangle because they were like, this is not unlike in Nazi Germany when this government was killing us, right? Like that is to make the parallel between the federal government not responding to HIV/AIDS. They were like, we understand this has happened before.
And this is why our organizations, we've got the Stonewall National Museum. I have a box of things from Gay Games 1994 that I actually need to take over. Now, maybe not, I guess it's the Stonewall Museum.
Yeah, Stonewall.
You know, but I mean, and, you know, both people mentioned, I know Barbara Giddings has been gone a while. I think David,
Frank
we are,
Giddings has too.
we've lost the activist to old age, and we lost a lot to AIDS too.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And the people
we really need to support these museums and archives that keep this alive, because, and then we got to get the youngins to, hey, this is why we're on you and why we're so concerned.
Yeah, why it's so
Get
important.
politicians out of the way first.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, so. Well, next, let's queer up health. In the queer American history, in 1984, U.S. company Abbott creates the first HIV test. Abbott Laboratories, a U.S. healthcare company, played a significant role in the development of HIV testing technology. However, it was not until 1984 that they created the first HIV test. It started in 1983 when the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, was identified as the cause of acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, AIDS. This discovery was made by researchers at the Pasteur Institute in France and the National Cancer Institute in the United States. In 1984, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, licensed the first commercially available blood test to detect HIV antibodies. This test, known as the enzyme immunoassay, EIA, was developed by Dr. Robert Gallo and his team at the National Institute of Health, NIH, in collaboration with Abbott Laboratories. These tests were vital in detecting and reducing the number of new cases of HIV during the peak of AIDS epidemic of the 80s. Wow, this is so significant and so powerful. It's just really, it makes me feel good inside that people cared this much to, put a stop to this and figure something out, especially for our community, even though it wasn't just our community that was privy to HIV
Being
or
affected,
AIDS.
right.
Right.
Well, I'm certainly grateful for historical advances such as this one. It's also a reminder that the pharmaceutical industry has gotten very rich.
Yeah.
Very rich in the backs of the gay community. And
Off sickness, right? Like that is like not cures.
no,
But like
maintenance.
right.
Because if you cure something, you won't make any money.
Just like the Sacklers and
Right.
OxyContin,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
This is
It was a lot of intentional too. Like it took that long was very intentional.
Yeah.
And fun fact, Anthony Fauci was in the NIH during that time. That guy has been around for a long time.
Oh my God.
He's seen a lot of pandemics. And
Jesus.
I wrote this down. Test regularly, okay? We still have HIV, AIDS.
Yeah.
Test regularly.
100%.
I still test, not as often because nobody's chasing after me, but, I still test. It was important for me to test. My late husband was HIV positive 24 years at the time of his death, and he was concerned about passing me the virus. So we were really stinking careful. But it's like, all it takes is once, test. The sooner.
And I remember in high school, when I remember in 9th grade, I learned that you can get the virus and it will not detect for up to 6 months, sometimes
Dormancy.
longer.
Dormancy,
And that is, a solid memory that I won't forget. Core memory that stuck with me and made me almost a hypochondriac when it came to STDs, which a lot of them aren't detected right away, So like you said, definitely test often, even if you're not sexually active. Just give yourself the peace of mind and have enough respect for, your future partners.
and understand also that now the science has developed and you can live a long and healthy life with HIV. There are treatments available where you can go undetectable.
That undetectable means untransmissible, and
there's something might be coming soon, HIV vaccine I've heard about.
I've heard
or
a little
did they
bit
approve
about
it recently? I think that was one of the.
Think about what this meant for people, right? In the 80s, to suddenly to not have it felt like a game of Russian roulette, something, right? Like you just didn't know what was happening.
Watching
right?
your friends
This
dying
was a transformative moment for people to have, because knowledge is power, right?
Exactly.
And this is the part the government didn't want.
Here's something else coming down the pike. I forget which anti-cancer drug it is, but they're finding it can kickstart the immune system to,
I saw that.
I want to say it's Keytruda, but don't quote me. But it's like, these things are coming down the pike. So,
and I'm very sex positive here, so do what you got to do. Just be responsible, get tested, and
absolutely,
there are medications out there for you if something happens. If things happen.
Lots of approaches and lots of go ahead.
Okay, next let's queer up the courts. In queer American history, Obergefell v. Hodges ruling by Supreme Court legalizes gay marriage. Obergefell v. Hodges is a landmark U.S. Supreme Court case that legalized same-sex marriage in the United States. The case originated from a series of lawsuits filed by same-sex couples from several states who were seeking the right to marry or to have their out-of-state marriages recognized. The case reached the U.S. Supreme Court after various lower courts issued conflicting rulings on the constitutionality of state bans on same-sex marriage. The Supreme Court agreed to hear 4 consolidated cases: Obergefell v. Hodges, Tonko v. Haslam, DeBoer v. Snyder, and Bork v. Bashir. On June 26, 2015, in a 5-4 decision, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that same-sex couples have the fundamental right to marry under the 14th Amendment's due process and equal protection clauses of the Constitution. The ruling in Obergefell v. Hodges effectively legalized same-sex marriage nationwide, making it legal and recognized in all 50 states and Washington, D.C. The Obergefell ruling granted same-sex couples the same legal recognition and protections as opposite-sex couples, including benefits related to taxation, inheritance, healthcare, and adoption, among others. But while the Obergefell ruling legalized same-sex marriage nationwide, efforts are ongoing to secure and protect LGBTQ plus rights in areas such as employment, non-discrimination, transgender rights, and healthcare, among others. This feels like yesterday, because it was like yesterday, and I remember that happening, and I'm saying there is a possibility in my lifetime I'll be able to get married, and we're slowly seeing that possibility kind of fade with the Supreme Court. I mean, I know it was Clarence Thomas, unfortunately, who said in the Dobbs decision that they needed to revisit Obergefell in that ruling. And so, I mean, it's still kind of on edge, but it's great that something like this happened in our lifetime, and it showed that the country kind of moved.
What a vastly different Supreme Court it was in 2015, which of course was reinforced just last week on the 29th of June when they struck down college affirmative action programs. So this is not our favorite Supreme Court.
Well done.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, and even then it was, I mean, that is in 2015. I mean, I remember this day too. Like it was a 5-4 decision. It was close. Like, no, we actually weren't sure. Like it was, and I have to admit, and I'm not, like I'm probably double your age a lot. And I don't mean that in age, but that is like, I didn't think it was going to happen in my lifetime. And I'm not like that much, like that, it just felt, that seemed impossible to me when I was a kid. Like that wasn't something that I thought was happening.
But didn't you think when you saw Massachusetts, Hawaii, California, when you saw it happening in the state by state thing, that it was...
I was watching the night. I was watching Rachel Maddow covering New York State live. And the only reason it's a core memory for me was that it was about, and I actually did the math on this recently because it showed up in my Facebook memories. It was about 8 months after Bruce died. And I was watching it live, and I watched it pass, and I was cheering 1 minute and on the floor in tears the next. Because had he lived, he might have asked me to marry him, and of course I would have said yes. And now I'm coming up on 13 years since that's happened. But, I mean, I'm surprised nobody's mentioned cakes. Because it's like a lot of this crap.
They'll be coming back to the cake soon.
The bakers.
The cake?
Yeah. That was the big thing, like 2 or 3 years ago. Oh, the cakes, the bathrooms, the cakes.
Oh, goodness.
And we still had that. What was the name of that bad-haired woman in the South that didn't...
Kim Davis.
Thank you.
Refused to give
her.
What a looker she was.
Was that Kentucky?
Yes, Kentucky.
It was Kentucky.
Yeah.
Kim Davis.
Anyway.
All right, y'all. When the conversation goes to Kim Davis, you know it's time to move on.
Yes, next, let's clear up LGBTQ plus civil rights. In queer America, progress has been made, but many still struggle. 20 years ago this month, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Texas' ban on sodomy, ruling that states could not criminalize homosexuality. John Lawrence and Tyron Gardner were the plaintiffs in that watershed ruling. Until then, LGBTQ plus people living in Texas and 13 other states lived under a dark cloud cast by laws that allowed law enforcement to arrest them for participating in consenting behavior among adults conducted in their private residences. In the 20 years since, advocates have secured major victories and cemented key rights, including marriage equality, employment protections, and the ability to serve in the military. Victories that likely would not have been achieved without the foundation of Lawrence v. Texas. Yet, not all members of the LGBTQ plus community have equally benefited from evolving attitudes toward and legal protections for the queer community. Notably, transgender people still face discrimination and violence at higher rates than their lesbian, gay, and bisexual peers. In recent years, as trans people have gained visibility in the public sphere, familiar anti-LGBTQ plus tropes have emerged in efforts to alienate this community. Advocates say this attention has prompted a new wave of legislation that in recent years that targets LGBTQ plus people, largely pushed by Republicans who have campaigned on these issues. And I wrote something down, and I'm not sure I want to start with that, because it's like I'm kind of repeating myself that, you know, we just want to be left alone. But, you know, I'm going to say this. As a result of doing this, I've come to meet trans people who are amazing. And, I mean,
we're all just people. At the end of the
exactly,
day, we're all just beings with veins and blood and bone.
You know, I love to quote a song from my remote youth, and somebody's going to have to help me because I'm old and my CD shuffle just hit a short circuit. But
what's a CD?
All I want is to be left alone in my average Rockwell. Rockwell. Somebody's watching me. All I want is to be left alone in my average home.
Yeah.
And I hate to be that guy, but this is probably going to be something the Supreme Court revisits. A consequence of people not voting in 2016.
Yeah, we say this all the time on the show. Vote, vote, vote. Get your friends to vote. And don't forget complacency. We became very complacent, and that is ultimately our enemy. We must never, ever stop fighting. I've been fighting for a long, long time, and I will continue to fight. We must never stop fighting for the rights of our people.
I want to, the story that you read, Bob, one of the things it says in that story is largely by Republicans. And I just want to say, it's not largely by Republicans, it is Republicans. Like that is like, and I think we can mix this up.
No exaggeration.
Like, this is not coming from that is like, the attacks are definitely coming from the GOP. Yeah. I will also say, like, to move it back to Barbara Giddings and Frank Hammoney, but, you know, this was such an important point 20 years ago with Lawrence v. Texas, because it wasn't like people were being prosecuted for sodomy laws like with any kind of regularity. It was so important to find, like, you know, to learn that the state government was no longer just criminalizing you as a person, right? Like for your personhood. Not unlike Giddings and Frank Camp, who was fighting so much to remove homosexuality from the list of mental disorders, which they got done in 1973. To wake up one day and be told you're no longer sick is so powerful. And like what that does, and that's exactly what these laws today are doing. They're telling trans people that they are not worthy of life, that they're not worthy of respect, that you are doing such harm. What you're doing is criminal. It's such an affront to human existence and it's such a problem.
Just like they do with every marginalized group now.
Yeah.
Women, black people, Jewish people.
Immigrants,
It's not just even the laws they're trying to do. What they're also trying to incite violence from. From private, because you can only do so much from the state unless you have absolute power. And so what they want to do right now is encourage violence. You can see this through the rhetoric their politicians are using and what they're using. Is open Twitter, and you see right-wingers saying stuff like, you got to stop them from grooming our children. What they're doing is they're trying to get people killed.
I want to bring home a point you touched on. You know, we are no longer sick.
Yeah.
I think that's really stinking important that we emphasize it right here, right now, because I guarantee you there's a teenager watching this in secret who needs to hear they're not sick.
For sure.
Never
And
was.
they need to know.
And never was.
And thank you, and never was.
Well said.
And they need to hear what our esteemed host, the Reverend, the lead minister here.
Darrell.
Thank you, Darrell Watkins. You know,
well said.
I have heard him say
Affirming.
this several times. Even God cannot heal what is not sick.
Yeah. Well
You are
said.
not sick and you never were.
Right.
Well
The
said.
true sickness are the people who use hate to target other people, more vulnerable people. That's true sickness.
Y'all are giving me life today. Love it. Yeah.
It is the sociopathy. Oh, that word. Psychopathy is a disease.
All right.
Okay, next we are proud of our special partnership with Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church here in Fort Lauderdale. Supporting that partnership, we are broadcasting from our permanent set here at Sunshine Cathedral at the Happening Out television studios. We broadcast Sunshine Cathedral Sunday International Service at 10:30 a.m.
That is today's news for the LGBTQ plus community on the world's first and only daily LGBTQ plus evening news show.
If our community is important to you, share this news with your friends and family. Are you, like most of America, part of our very large television audience watching this live LGBTQ plus news broadcast right now on Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, and Amazon Fire TV?
Queer News Tonight is the only live LGBTQ plus digital television show in the world that is out of the closet and into the headlines. We need your support. If our community is to grow, we must tell our stories and bring them to the attention of the broader world.
This is the only place in the world that tells these types of LGBTQ plus stories in motion and sound. That is the passion of Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network, and Queer News Tonight.
I'm your anchor, Julio Capo Jr., and on behalf of these LGBTQ plus awesome, super awesome reporters, the anchors of Queer News Tonight, including Jess Rachel, Gregg Shapiro, Elijah Manley, and Bob Hentschel, we will see you daily at 8 p.m. Happy 4th to our LGBTQ plus world. We see you and we wish you a
Good night.
good night.
We are Queer News Tonight, the world's first and only live daily LGBTQ plus evening news show, brought to you from Happening Out television network. We operate in the same model of PBS and NPR, but for the LGBTQ plus community. We educate, inform, and entertain by supporting the 10 pillars of our LGBTQ plus community, with more than 100,000 a week watching us on Roku, Apple Television, and other channels. To keep the story going, we accept donations with 100% transparency. Stay updated and live authentically with Queer News Tonight.